Welcome to Rewatch and Rank. On this channel, we rewatch older TV shows, provide a summary and opinion on the episode before ranking each episode against each other. Today's episode is Charmed Season 2, Episode 21, Apocalypse Not. The episode in a nutshell is just a brief reminder of exactly what happens within this episode. So the episode starts with the sisters coming back from a girls' day of spa and shopping, when Leo arrives at the door, commenting on how close the sisters have been lately and reminding Piper that they had a show that they were going to go to, and asks if she'd like to go to dinner. And she hesitates to go with him, wanting to continue to spend time with her sisters. But after her sisters encourage her, she and Leo go to dinner. On their way back from dinner, they happen to get caught up in a road rage incident, and Piper, seeing all the violence going on, freezes the street. However, one person, a man in a black suit with a green tie, does not freeze and instead runs away. Piper and Leo give chase. However, by the time they get to the alley, he has long gone. We, as the audience, get to see that he transfers into a different fielded area where he meets his companions, which reveals that they are the four horsemen of the apocalypse. And basically, he lets his fellow horsemen know that he got caught by a witch, and they all decide that they need to remedy this, and so they need to get rid of the witch, and they decide to set a trap by basically luring them out with more violence. Piper and Leo, of course, return home, talk about the Piper talks about what she saw, and the sisters, with no real information to go on other than it was a guy who didn't freeze, who could vanish, and had been wearing a black suit with a green tie, have no idea who they're up against, and go through the Book of Shadows, decide Demon of Anarchy sounds close enough, make the potion, head with the chant, and arrive at a riot after calling Daryl to find out where the nearest hotspot is. They then each say their chants at the same time, and it ends up with Prue and the red tie falling into a different plane of existence, and both sides basically go their separate ways, very upset, but they're both sure that their compatriots are not dead. And when they return to the manor, Prue arrives and from the other plane kind of goes through Piper, who is able to sense her, though Phoebe is able to sense the other guy because he goes through her. And they decide that they need to find a way to save Prue. While on the other side, the horsemen need war to be able to bring about the apocalypse at 7 o'clock that night on a bit of a short deadline. And so they contact the source to try to set up a meeting, realizing that they're going to need to cooperate because it was a combination of their chants and potions, etc., that caused the incident. Leo is called by the elders, brings back the offer to the sisters, who, thanks to free will, have the free will to choose to cooperate with evil if they want to, and of course, they want to. We then have both sides coming together. They figure out that they created a pentagram, and Prue and War were in the middle of the pentagram, and therefore the best option that they have to bring them back is essentially to reverse what they did. So stand on opposite ends of the pentagram, say the chants with save instead of vanquish, in order to basically reverse everything. While they're planning this, Death returns to the office and Leo follows him, discovering their true identities for the first time. Leo brings back that information to the sisters, who still are determined to save Prue. However, when they arrive at the alleyway where they are going to reverse the spells, Phoebe is the one who shakes hands with Strife, and she gets a vision of basically mushroom clouds, the end of the world, and decides that saving Prue can't be worth every other living person on the planet. And so she stops chanting and refuses to do so, which shows the source that there's still too much good in the world, and he then decides to open the portal vortex and starts to vanquish this team of horsemen. The sisters take that opportunity while the vortex is opened to finish their half, which they had not done previously, and Prue is then pulled out. War also comes out and is vanquished by the source alongside the other three. And this leads us to our happily ever after. We then get our club scene at the end where the sisters are kind of in their little VIP booth, and they are talking kind of about, well, kind of coming down how, like they should get something. They've saved the world. Nobody even knows it. And Leo comes over and basically congratulates them, lets them know about how they succeeded, why the source vanquished evil, but also warns them that evil's just going to start trying harder from now on to try to eradicate the good in the world. And then, of course, the sisters invite him to a drink. But contrary to the beginning when he was kind of iffy about them spending so much time together, he declines, saying that they need to spend more time bonding as sisters, and this is where we end our episode. So now comes the part of the video where we get to rank the episode. We rank on 2 lists on the channel. We rank on our mostly objective list, which is void of emotion, though bias and judgment can still apply, and then the personal ranking list, which is naturally my personal opinion. So as always, we're going to start with our mostly objective rank values, and this one was difficult for me because, well, I'll talk about that later, but with the single episode supporting character introduction, I was torn on whether I should count Death, Strife, War, and Famine as separate entities or as a unit, the 4 Horsemen of the Apocalypse. However, throughout the entire episode, it is very much hammered home that they are a unit, they are a team. They basically gave up their personal identities to become part of the team. There have been teams before, they succeed together or they fail together. And as such, I felt that the 4 Horsemen of the Apocalypse is more the character than each of the individual factions of it, shall I say. So I decided to count them as one, which obviously impacts the score, but that is why I have 2 lists. So all 4 Horsemen of the Apocalypse are counted as a unit and worth 1 point overall. We then get our multi-season main character growth. At the start of the episode, Phoebe has bought a book while they were out shopping that day, and it's full of like the philosophical big questions. And the question that she randomly opens to is, if there was a fire, would you save 1 sibling or 5 strangers? And each of them, with no hesitation whatsoever, state that they would save 1 sibling. Obviously, as we go through this episode, we have them faced with this decision in real life. They can save 1 sibling or the entirety of the world. And right up until Phoebe gets her vision at the last moment when she shakes hands with Strife, they are prepared to choose 1 sibling over the entire world. However, once the reality hits Phoebe after seeing the vision, she realizes that the correct answer morally would be the 5 strangers. And when we get to the very end of the episode, when they are in their little booth at the club, one of the workers comes over, asks them that question, because he'd borrowed the book from Phoebe, and asks them the same one. If there was a fire, 1 sibling, 5 strangers, and this time, without any hesitation, all of them answer that they would choose 5 strangers. And this, of course, shows that they have learnt that lesson, that sometimes the bigger picture has to overcome, your selfish wants, desires. That is to say, your personal sibling. I want to say, I was going to word that wrong. Like, your sibling is not worth less than 5 strangers. That's obviously not the case. But sometimes for the bigger picture, you have to choose 5 strangers over the sibling for the greater good's outcome, is essentially, I think, what the lesson is here. We also get a little bit of character growth with Leo, who at the start of the episode is kind of having difficulty with his girlfriend spending a lot of time with her sisters, a lot more than usual. But by the end, he accepts that they kind of need that bonding time and that they are a unit together. And he kind of accepts that. And so when they invite him to have a drink with them at the end in the booth, he takes a step back and says, no, you guys need your time together, and decides to bow out, which shows a little bit of growth there. Not a lot, though. But some. So that is then 4 points. The other 4 points is, of course, the world building aspect, which introduces that there are some forms of evil that are not demons or warlocks that are even higher than them that may be unable to be vanquished by any witch. For example, the 4 horsemen are only able to be destroyed by the source for failing, but otherwise were untouchable. So unless the source had decided to kill them when they opened the vortex, they would have not been able to be stopped by even the charmed ones. So we learn that there are those even greater levels of evil. And of course, that they all fall under the domain of the source of all evil. And then we also learn that there are 11 planes of existence, according to Phoebe, and this is where Prue and War end up trapped in one of these 11 planes due to the vortex created by their clashing spells. We then, of course, have, and that was worth another 4 points, but then we do have one negative in the episode, and that, of course, was our main relationship regression. Or breakup, but in this case it was regression. And basically in the last episode, we left Piper and Leo in a very good place. Then this episode, Leo's coming over. They're finally getting to spend time together. He's off early. He's inviting her to dinner. And she's very hesitant to go with him when her sisters do convince her to go to dinner with Leo, and they are the ones who need to convince her. It's not something that she herself wants to do, it appears. They then are kind of arguing on the way back about how, Piper has plenty of room in her heart and her life for all of them. And Leo's like, but I need to know which room's mine, to like where he stands within that whole large heart of hers. And then, of course, they have that. And then throughout working together with the 4 horsemen, Leo is constantly trying to caution them, trying to tell them that working with evil's not a good idea. They could end up betrayed. They're making a bad choice, blah, 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 so on and so forth. And she essentially is ignoring him and choosing constantly to take her sister's side, to work with her sisters, 3 against 1ing him. Which obviously is a little bit of a drop off from where we had ended the previous episode, where they were in a very good place with their relationship, seeing each other quite frequently, being able to be together. However, that being said, while it is a bit of a regression, by the end, Leo has the character growth that accepts that she needs time with her sisters and to bond with her sisters, and that, he's sharing priority with them. And that's where we get that. But I'd still say it is a regression. And then by the end, I don't really count it as a main relationship development because they kind of just go back to where they started, which is being in a good place. So, with all of those factors considered, this episode officially is a 6 out of 10 on our mostly objective rank values. So as a reminder of our Season 2 rankings so far on our mostly objective ranking, in first place we have Witch Trial, The Painted World, She's a Man Baby, a Man, They're Everywhere, P3H2O, Ms. Hellfire, Awakened, Give Me a Sign, Ex Libris, Morality Bites, Heartbreak City, Pardon My Past, Murphy's Luck, Chick Flick, Astral Monkey. This episode, Apocalypse Not, falls into 16th place. We then in 17th have That Old Black Magic, Reckless Abandon, How to Make a Quilt Out of Americans, Animal Pragmatism, and so far last, The Devil's Music. Now we're on to my personal ranking, and this episode is a prime example of exactly why I have two lists. Because I don't like that it was only a 6 out of 10 for personal. This, spoiler, is my favorite episode of this season. Hands down. I love this episode. I think it's great. Everything about it I thought was great. And yet it only scored a 6, so obviously I am scoring it higher than that. Duh. But a few of the callouts that I had. Obviously, I love the entire plot line. We talked about that in the summary. Though, so there is the run of Strife, as I call it. So when Piper freezes the street and Strife is caught standing there looking around, he runs away. And he has the funniest run. It is a really funny run. It almost looks like he's limping or something, like he's kind of off balance. It's hilarious. But then it goes from a funny run into like an epic, suddenly he's like on a horse, he has a shiny cape, and then he's transferred from an alley into a lush open field. And then we have the other horsemen with their shiny capes instead of the suits, their more traditional garb on their horses. And we get this epic scene of them appearing out of lightning on the field and then like running towards the camera. And I'm like, imagery, love it. It's amazing. And then they have their little powwow in the grass. We then have basically the reason I didn't count this as any sort of development for the characters is that it's been happening since episode 1. So in episode 1, obviously, the sisters are reuniting after being apart for a while. They have some conflicts in the past, and we see this brought up every so often in season 1. But we see progressively as they fight demons together, the sisters and their sisterly bond has been getting closer and closer and closer. And this is the episode that they chose as showrunners to highlight this bond that has been gradually forming throughout the series. And that is why I didn't count it on our mostly objective list, but I do want to highlight that they really highlight how strong that bond has become, how well they get along now, how strong their bond is, almost to the point where they were willing to sacrifice the entirety of the world in favor of their sibling bond. And I really liked that. I liked that little exploration, especially as how they used kind of Leo to do that as well, with, Piper being in this loving relationship that she worked so hard to gain, that she was clearly very invested in, and yet still willing to choose her sisters over the love of her life, literally. We know this from future episodes. Love of her life, she'll pick her sisters first, almost picked the sister over the world. So it really is using everything that they can to highlight just how strong this bond has become for the Charmed ones, which makes the end of the next season even more tragic, but we'll get there when we get there. I also liked with the Four Horsemen like the way that they were treating the apocalypse so emotionlessly. Pardon my pronunciation. And they were talking about it like it was like a business venture, and they like had their little notepads and like PDAs out, and they were just like talking about it like, oh, peace has broken out, or strife is up by this much percent, business language. I'm not a business person. I don't speak that language naturally, but they were using it, and I love the way that they did that. I think it just added a whole other element. I also like how there was like a full-on office with like boards tracking the progress, almost like they're tracking stocks. There was like a whole office building worth of staff who all were wearing like the same uniform, and then each of the um, horsemen had a black suit with a tie colored after their particular brand. Black for death, red for war, yellow for famine, and green for strife. That was all amazing. I love how Leo took on the identity of a spy, following Death back to the office once they decide to cooperate to find out their true identities, how he knocks out one of the employees, steals his clothes so he can blend in, and kind of just tours the office. Love that. And then I have to call it out. It's not a supporting relationship by any means, but there is a brief scene where Phoebe and Strife are talking about the their chants back and forth, and they have a bit of a flirty moment. Like they smile at each other, they have all this chemistry, and he even asks if she's always been a witch or if she's ever been a demon because there's something about her. And they have this moment, and honestly, I loved that moment. And I also think it also is great foreshadowing and hinting because she does end up with Cole, who is not necessarily the good guy, and she does seem to have some chemistry with the bad guys, as shown here with Strife. But I always, always, always remember that one scene. Like, it was a very personally impactful moment to me, and I wish that that had maybe been a relationship, though it couldn't have been because they were opposite sides. They betrayed them in the end. They got vanquished by the Source. But either way, I think there was great chemistry in that scene. I love the flirty scene, and it's one that's very memorable throughout the series, I think. I think. But having said all that and pointed out some of my favorite aspects of the episode, as I mentioned, it's a 10 out of 10 for me. A favorite of the season, which then brings our season 2 rankings so far and our personal ranking to in first place. Apocalypse Not, Give Me a Sign, P3H2O, Awakened, Ms. Hellfire, Heartbreak City, Ex Libris, Witch Trial, Murphy's Luck, The Painted World, Chick Flick, They're Everywhere, Pardon My Past, Reckless Abandon, She's a Man Baby, a Man, The Devil's Music, and then in 17th, Animal Pragmatism, How to Make a Quilt Out of Americans, Morality Bites, That Old Black Magic, and in last place so far, Astral Monkey. And finally, at last, we do come to our series ranking so far, which is where we are going to be ranking each of the seasons against each other and determining which of the seasons are stronger overall than the others. As a reminder, on our mostly objective ranking, Season 1 closed out with 73.18% as its final score, and Season 2 so far has gathered a score of 155 out of 220, with one episode to go. And on our personal ranking, Season 1 reached a final score of 71.50%, and Season 2 so far has earned 117 points out of 220, again with one episode to go. So with that, we've now rewatched and ranked Charmed Season 2, Episode 21, Apocalypse Not. Like and subscribe if you'd like to, and I'll see you in the next episode.